Good morning, everyone. It's okay, the sound?
Yeah.
Okay? Good level?
Yeah.
More or less? So first of all, I would like to thank Bruno, Carol, Berto, I think that the organizers of the meeting for the invitation. Thank you very much. A pleasure to be here. The winter school. Today is a winter day, yesterday wasn't. Now it's more proper, the word. What are the questions that I will talk about today? The most general questions is encroaching in this sentence made by Jeffrey, the name of the guy, I think so. Is the word flat? It defends that the word is flat. And he made this statement, and it became famous, this statement, the word is flat. But our question is different. We do not believe in this kind of thing. And we try to answer the question if are there some kind of asymmetries in the development, mainly in globalization. In the past, there was some kind of restrictions. And our idea is that this restraints, they became more difficult to overcome. This is the idea, the main idea of our research. And it is very curious because if you talk, if you read the research of the guys that work with technological issues, development issues, they agree that there are restrictions that is more difficult to make the catch up. But when the questions are related to the international monetary system, there is a lot of controversy about these issues. For us, it's more clear because we have been working this issue for the last 20 years. And I will present for you some of this research, some questions that we have been dealing here in our institute, in our group company. And what is the main idea? The main idea is, yes, there are a lot of asymmetries, some of them very important. This is the idea. And they are worse than in the past. Because nowadays, besides the asymmetries that came from technology and size of companies and a lot of things that used to be very important in the past, nowadays you have the asymmetries that came from the IMS. This is the idea of our research. And this should be seen in the environment of a new pattern of capitalist development. This is the idea. I will talk a little bit about this. I wrote some papers. I give you one reference, but there are others. But I won't talk about this in this lecture here. The idea, the basic idea, is that you have a new pattern of capitalist development that is called financialization and its counterpart, that is financial globalization. And this is put in practice a new form of organization and function of the IMS. This is the main idea. And this, a lot of restriction arise from this form of working of this new system, IMS. I use here as a reference a work that has just been published by me and Bruno, but there are a lot. I gave you a list. There are books, but I didn't put the books because you are Young people, you have the reference, you have to buy the book. I don't know if you would be able to buy the book, but the article 20, something are there in the reference. So let's begin with this idea. What is the background of our discussion? This is the way to represent what the mainstream think about the question. This triangle called the impossible trinity. And it's called as well as the dilemma in the discussion. What this triangle says, you have here three features of the international monetary system. Capital mobility is one of them. Then you have the exchange rate model system, and you have the national autonomy of monetary policy. The idea here is that and this is true, that you cannot combine all the three features of this system. You have to combine two of the three. Then when you combine the fixed system, exchange rate system, with capital mobility, you have the golden standard. When you combine fixed exchange rate system with restriction to capital mobility, you have Bretton Woods. And then when you combine floating and free capital mobility, you have globalization. This is the idea. The idea in the globalization is that if you have free capital mobility and free floating, you have autonomy from the point of view of the economic domestic policy, the monetary policy. This is the main idea. This is a good point. It is important, but this is not entirely our point. We have a most comprehensive agenda in this discussion of the IMS and the kind of constraints that it poses to our economy. What kind of thing? The general discussion is that thing of be a policy taker in general, to be dependent on the liquidity, the global liquidity side. This is the first question that we are very keen on. The second one is volatility. What are the pattern of volatility that came from this movement of the rest of the world? There are broad questions that only, is there some autonomy in the monetary policy or not? They are more broad questions. The other thing is how to deal with human births that are very peculiar to the movement of capital nowadays. The other one is very big question, sovereignty. Why we are concerned about this kind of? Because if you look at Latin America, there are a lot of countries, some of them very big countries, that give up their sovereignty. This is very important concerning monetary issues and so on. So this is our concern as well. And the last one, this is our our title of our privilege and duties. Is there privilege in this system and duties? This is one question that is very important to us. Let's continue with the question of background. We see there is some kind of background here that are very important, kind of literature. I didn't give it to you because this is a well-known, but it's here. I will send this to you. Maybe you know this kind of literature. But where does the debate come from? This is the idea. And there is, in the left side, it's wrong. It should be in the left side, but it's in the right side, but it's in the left side. What I call mainstream. Some paradoxes here I will explain you. And the other side there is what I call the criticism on the function of the ideas. The most influential paper, it's not a paper, it's a report, is the work made by Carneiro, was a chief economist of League of Nations. And he was there in the interwar period. And he wrote a report on the function of a system with free capital mobility and free floating. And the role this stabilize of the system. It's very amazing, it's very important, this paper, this report. And it has influenced very much Keynes and Dexter's work in the drafts and in the future of the Bretton Woods agreement. It was very important. The idea of fixed, the system of fixed exchange rates, the idea to curb capital movements, all of these things were there. There was, as you know, there was a dispute between Keynes and Dexter White because Keynes would like to finish this idea of currency as store of value. He proposed the Van Gogh. But it was refused by the Americans, their hegemony. But it was a good debate, and they proceed in this kind of thing. Fixed exchange rate, no capital mobility, because they are destabilized. This was the debate by the 50s, even in the beginnings of the 60s. Then it comes Mr. Friedman, here in the right side, that wrote an influential paper as well, defending the system. It's called the case for flexible exchange rate and capital mobility, where they defend the idea that it was stabilized, the system, not destabilized. And the flaws of that there wasn't flaws in the system, but the problem that happened in the interwar period was related to the economic policy put in practice by the countries, not by the system. The system was good. This is his ideas. Very important thing. Then you have a long, from this onwards, you have all the papers and the work from the institutions. And how I can say this, an environment that progressively defend the idea of free float and capital mobility. The main models are everybody knows this, is Mundell-Fleming models. This is the idea to show what is Mundell-Fleming. It's very interesting. It's a kind of ISLM for the open economy. Very interesting, but there is an idea that is pervasive in the world, is that the world is flat. There is no currency hierarchy. This is the main idea of shows. But it was disseminated. Then it came the guys in the 90s, Obstfeld, the guy that came from NEF, that very late, defending free capital mobility. And they even simplified the model to deal with this trinity. Mr. Eichinger is surprised, but he's here in the system, defending this system. He's in both sides, Eichinger is very strange. And even some contribution from a heterodox economy, like this one worked by Underway. Defending is exactly the idea of the dilemma. If you have a free float system, you can insulate your country from the movement of the international system and have autonomy in your monetary policy. This is the idea of all these people. Orthodox, heterodox, they are the same in this issue. It's very important to say that. Then what happened with now a kind of, I don't say art now, but a less important branch of thinking related to the system. We have the people from international political economy. This work by Benjamin Conti, that's very important, where he defends that the system has a hierarchy. It's very important to deal with it. Then we have other economists, Calvin, for example. What he said? This free floating, we should be cautious with this free float because for some countries there is very different implication. Fear of floating, this is the name of this word. Then it came housing, punishment, and ice cream with the idea of original sin. Yes, there are some differences in the system. Some countries cannot issue that in their own currency. So this is a problem. And then this idea goes to the mainstream. Because this woman here, Helen Ray, is an economist from the mainstream. And what she's saying, no, there is no dilemma. There is no kind of, in a system of free float, with this feature, some economists are polystater. It is relevant if the system is free float or fixed float. It's the same. They have no authority. It's a kind of dilemma, not a trilemma. So this is the debate. Then let's continue here. Let's put more clear now what are our ideas concerning this way of working of the system, of this system. I'm trying to discuss here with you very precise, the IMS, the International Monetary System. This is the idea. And how it creates some constraints to the functioning of peripheral economies. This is the idea, because they define different classes of currency. And this is not isolated from the idea of financialization. I won't talk about this very much about this idea of financialization as a pattern of capital, of this new way of capitalist development. Only few words, I think they are relevant to understand what is happening in the issue that I want to discuss, that is financial globalization. Because it's more or less the same. You have a kind of pattern that I could denominate the dominance of financial wealth. What is this? A system that works in a very short term period, look at the in every field, productive, financial, and where markets have a lot of liquidity. So when Keynes was discussing chapter 13, 17, and I always confirm. He is discussing the idea of speculation. And he was making a comparison between the guy who's rich and the American. And he said, the rich is a guy that buys a financial asset thinking in the stream of the returns of these financial assets. The American is a guy that buys the asset thinking the valuation of the asset. So this is the logic of the system. And these assets are traded. This became the bubbles. This is the logic. And this system have the necessity to invent and create new assets to make tradable what is not tradable. And this is a very important thing. I won't discuss this. I have a paper that I put in the bibliography. But this is very important because it's the same logic in the international field. What is the movement of financial globalization? It's a movement of portfolio diversification that encompasses all the other movements. This is the idea. The system is a system of portfolio diversification. They have stage, different velocities, but this is the system. There is a very interesting discussion here that what's the implication, what are the implications of financial globalization? When we are dealing with this kind of thing, it's very interesting to define this because, of course, you have trade, you have FDI, but they are subordinated to the movement of portfolios. You can think of a system. I remember here Marx when he said, "Oh, there are commodities, there are money, but they are subordinated to the movement of capital." This is the idea. Of course, they remain as important nations. Trade, investment, yes, okay, very good. But look, the main movement here came from this idea of the portfolio is the main movement. And why? Because you need new assets and you need to diversify your risk. You need risk diversification. This is the main idea. The uncorrelation of risks. This is because of this that they make this movement. Because if it wasn't this, they would stay in the United States. The movement of risk diversification and search for yield are the two movements of portfolio, of the portfolio. And the idea that you need new assets, and then when you open to the competitive openness of this country, the regulation, there is a very interesting author that called this competitive regulation. Then you have in both sides the movement of this. This is a kind of unification. And then there is a very interesting idea because in the first phase of the movement, that was made by the beginning of the 90s, the movement of portfolio diversification was mainly among developed countries. And then why they moved to peripheral countries? Because then they unified very much the idea of risk uncorrelated, became less important because the market unified a lot. They have unified a lot. This is the idea. And then the second step was in the direction of peripheral economies, assets from peripheral economies. This is very important. Nowadays, they are discussing if there is another stage. And the stage nowadays would be one where the return overcome risk diversification as the main determinant of the movement of the portfolio. More short-term, more related to macroeconomic variables. This is the idea that are kind of updated discussion in this system. One thing that is very important here is the changing nature of the key currency. You know, the dollar was the key currency of the system since the 1940, the Second World War. There was no dispute about this. But what were the foundation of the dollar dominance and the dollar as a K currency. Invoice, trades, FDI. This is the substract of the dollar dominance. This is the idea. And then with the globalization, we can put equity, debt, reserves, private wealth. You change the basis of the dollar dominance from flow to stocks, from income to wealth. And this changed the nature of the key currency. This is, you don't have in the Bretton Woods system this kind of openness. And even the countries, peripheral or developed, they don't have reserves in this scale. Why? They don't need the system doesn't operate like this. So you change the backbone, I can say this, of the key currency. It's not flow, it's not trade, it's not invoicing, it's securities, reserves, wealth. This is the new nature. We can discuss a little bit more this kind of thing. Of course, in this kind of thing, I put one sentence here that is, in fact, came from a very interesting French economist. It was in French, l'obsession de la liquidité. Obsession de la liquidité. The obsession with liquidities. This is how the system works. And I will explain to you why this is important. Why you have a key currency and all the reference related to the key currency become more stronger. Because the system works like this. Let's explore this kind of thing, discussing the idea of the key currency. It's very interesting, this kind of, to discuss the key currency. Because what is the key currency nowadays? Is it backed? Is it linked? Or is it fiduciary? Well, it is fiduciary because the dollar is not linked to the gold, not backed by gold. The dollar is fiduciary because it is a very strange creature. Why? Because there is no supranational state to issue the dollar. But the dollar is used as an international currency. So, how is this possible? It's not a simple question. Because you fit all the theories, even the modern monetary theory, they said that a currency is a sovereign creature where you issue the currency because you have to pay tax. What kind of tax rights does it mean? There is an international currency without a state, supremacy around the world, and usually it's fiduciary. It's based on trust. Is this correct? Little bit. You have trust, but I think you have other things that are more important than trust. If I would like to make a provocation, I don't know if there is this word in English, I would say, is the dollar the only currency of the system? Is this the status of the dollar? This is a very important question. Because it's a way to match the idea that you have a fiduciary currency and don't have a supranational state. Not even an agreement. This is not a public currency. This is a private one from one country. This is very important. Uh, the, the question here, why the dollar is the currency of the system, the only one, is where we can find the clues to understand this. The first thing is the dollar fulfills all the traditional conditions to be the currency, the most important currency of the system. Size, political power, denomination, everything that you think. The dollar was very important. But you have one condition more that I will try to explore here. Is that the dollar is the anchor of financial wealth. This is very, very important. The other thing is that you have a progressive role of the dollar in the system, in the international monetary system. What is this? The dollar became an international currency. And it is not because the dollar denominates invoices and pays, you discharge debts in dollar, etc. It is because the dollar, if you think in the cross-border financing made by banks, most part of it is dollar denominated. If you think in securities issued outside, I'm dealing here not with the banks inside the United States, the capital markets in the United States. What I'm saying is outside the US jurisdiction, most of the cross-border banks loans are made in dollars. Most of issue of securities are made in dollars. The dollars is an international currency. Most of the reserves, the capital markets in the United States is the biggest one. So this is the idea that the dollar is the anchor of the wealth. Because of this, not trust in abstract, that the dollar is the main currency of the system, maybe the only one. And what are the implications? What we call, we take this expression, this statement by the General de Gaulle. You are very young, maybe you don't know the General de Gaulle. Who was the General de Gaulle? He was a French general, president of the France in the post-Second World War, that began to complain about the US. Look, what is this? You have a currency, international currency, you have debts all the time, and you pay with this painted paper to us. This is a kind of, you have to make the adjustment, you have to pay gold. This was a discussion. And they said, the US have an exorbitant privilege. This is the idea. It came from General de Gaulle. It's very interesting because what happened with this kind of American privilege to do not adjust to current account deficits. What happened to this? This is the idea of globalization. The Americans were able to change the nature of this kind of dominance. What happened with the discussion? I want you to pay me with gold. From the 80s onwards, the policy of the United States, the globalization, has turned treasuries, American treasuries, in the main source, main store of value in the world. So the American began to pay the world not with gold, but with treasures. This is the main modification that happened. If you look in the 80s, in the mid of the 80s, American the American capital markets, what more or less 2/3 of the capital markets in the world, backed by treasuries. This is the first movement of globalization. This is the movement, the transformation of the Americans. Is a very interesting movement. So I have to go a little bit more. What are the implications nowadays, not in the past, because in the past it was to do not adjust the current account. This was the privilege of it, to not change the policy. But nowadays, what are the privileges of the United States? Of the key currency? It doesn't matter if it is one United States, it would be another country. It is the United States, but it's the privilege of the key currency. 3 or 4 privileges that we can discuss here. The first of one, to set the interest rate of the system. I will try to demonstrate that this is very important here. Why? The second one, it is the relevance of the exchange rate regime. It doesn't matter for the US. Floating is not a problem at all. Why this? Because of 2 things. Because most of the price of the world are set in dollars. It's not only commodities. A lot of electronics are set in dollars as well. Most of the price of the world are set in dollars. Most of the debt and the credit in the world are set in dollars, even the one from the US. Mainly, I would say. So there's no problem. When the currency floats, what's the problem? All the prices set in dollar, debt are set in dollar. So it doesn't matter. So it's not important to the US, the floating system. It's very important to the other country, but not to the US. And what is the other important thing that came from the privilege? The ability to define the global cycle. And then we'll talk about this. The cycle. The world cycle is defined in the United States. The movements of risk aversion, monetary policy, and so on. It's like this that works. Maybe André will detail this kind of thing that I think is very important. And in the opposite side, what is the peripheral currency? The first question here is if they are currency or assets. It's a very, very important question. Currency or assets. You know that currency, there is some demand for currencies that's not dependent on the interest rate and the exchange rate. They are store value, liquidity. They are valued like this. Asset is different. So the first question is, are they currencies or assets? This is a very important question. Why? Because you can keep a fraction for your currency. Thomas, if you pay something, if you are able that to try to transform your currency in assets. This is a very discussion. There is a background discussion here, very interesting. This guy, Benjamin Cohen, is very clever. He's not an economist, he's a politician, I think. Geographer?
Yeah, international political economics is his field. He's not a geographer.
And he developed an idea when he was dealing with this kind of pyramid, because he built a pyramid to classify the currency in the world. He made a statement, he developed an idea that is very interesting. The idea of currency internationalization and currency restitution. What he said? He said, if you put currencies together, if you unify markets, financial markets. What will happen? If you have currency internationalization, this is the idea, if your currency operates abroad, out of your limit of your borders, what will happen is that your currency, if it is good, it will substitute the other. There is no such thing of flat words in money and finance. This is almost a rule for monetary economy. And this happened. This is what's happened and intensified with the new phase of capitalism. And even you can think that it's not in the international environment. In some cases, some currencies, domestic currencies, are substituted in their national spaces. Don't think Argentina, but it's more or less like this. Or formerly Ecuador. This is what happened. Currency internationalization have a counterpart that is currency substitution. So this is the movement, the general movement that you can see peripheral currencies. It's very important here. The other thing that is very interesting to peripheral economics that defines is backed, linked, or fiduciary. Do you remember that we defined the key currency as fiduciary? And how about peripheral currencies? What are they? Let's suppose that you try to internationalize your currency. Only this. Make what the Brazilian economists recommended in the past. Make your currency convertible de jure. Remove all the regulation and permit that you can circulate around the world. What will happen? Nothing. Maybe you take some speculative attacks, but this will finish better. As it finished in the end of the 90s. And then what happened? Peripheral countries began to accumulate reserves. What are these reserves? What is the purpose in accumulating reserves? It's not a problem of domestic currency or policy. To accumulate currencies is a way to participate in a system, it's a kind of backing your currency. So you can say that peripheral currencies, the good ones, are backed to participate in the system. You are unable to have a fiduciary currency. You have to back your currency. Think in the case of China. And you can think in the case of all peripheral currencies, except Argentina, in the last 20 years. All of them are backed by dollars, euros, convertible currencies. It's a way that you guarantee that you can participate, that you can come to account, that you can come back. Because your currencies are not an asset. You have to give liquidity to your currency. This is very important to have in mind. So this is back, you pay a price for this, we will discuss this. The second problem or duty is that you are a cycle taker. There is a very interesting discussion here. I think it's important. I do not think this is not important. It's the grade that you have to take the global cycle. If there is room to have a kind of fiscal policy that you can deal or you can escape from this very huge movement that came from the international system. Good discussion. I don't have a theoretical answer. I would say it depends. We can discuss this of a lot of things. And the grade of compatibility indicators, a lot of things. I don't think that you can say, oh, well, there is a movement from the system and you can make a countervailing force here using fiscal policy. It's not like this. It's more difficult to deal with this kind of thing. But I will show to you why this is more difficult to deal. The third duty here is the exchange rate system. Floating permutation. Is this? Permutation. Why this? Because you have very obstacle. You cannot float properly your exchange rate. It's the opposite to the K currency. You don't set any price in your currency. Your debt, external debt, of course, the debt that you issue outside, abroad, is not denominated in currency. It is very important here, around the world. So you cannot leave your exchange rate to float freely. You can create a lot of. We are living here now in Brazil a problem like this. We have a big inflation, higher than the world, and one of the problems is the exchange rate fluctuation. This is a lot of companies had problem in Brazil related to the valuation of real. Why? Because it's mismatch. So you have the curve. You have to have a kind of dirty floating. Because the fixed system is unbearable. Improve this. So this is the thing that the dirty, that is very important. The other one is the monetary policy. Are you able in peripheral country to insulate your monetary policy? I don't think so. And here we can discuss the grade of the insulation. All the peripheral countries are not equal. But you have constraints that came from your recession. Even if this recession is good, if you're a big country, you have a good fiscal situation that is constant. There are constraints. This is because monetary policy has to deal with contradictory constraining objectives. Is this? You don't have the freedom that you have in central currency. This is because of this that we say that the world is not flat. Let's take a little bit of water. Now I will try to make a more formal argument about the hierarchy of the system, using the idea of Keynes, that the old rates of returns and the choice of assets. Not know maybe you have read this seventh chapter of Keynes. What is the idea? I began saying that the first expression here, this is the graph is I pick it up from the internet. It's the yield growth. When you have treasury, you have companies. You don't have here the most important, but let's suppose that the blue one is country risk. Any or a lot of them. You have, this is how the market, we are thinking here in the dollar market, capital markets in the United States. So you have the treasury, for the first one, the lower. Then the country risk, very mixed with the companies. Here, you have the term premium. Maturities, yield. The liquidity preference, you have to compensate for the time. You can lose money. This is the idea that maybe you all of you are aware of it. Then you have the other story. Here we have risk-free. Treasury, in this sense, is risk-free. You pay a compensation for treasury. The risks only relate to the term premium. It's not to the risk. The risk is free, zero. And then you can put the highest yields here. Relate to what? Relate to risk, credit risk, and market risk. Because of this, that you have this curve. But all of them are in dollars. Okay? The hierarchy here is credit risk. All of them suffer from this liquidity preference and so on. Let's come back. It's only to explain what is this graph. Okay? This is a market. It's a very simplified version of a market. But it's this. You have all the growth, the yield curve. Let's begin with the first expression. What does it say? It says that the total return in an asset and peripheral country is by definition, look at this, by definition, independent from cycle, from a lot, by definition, the total return of a title equal title, similar title, a treasury of 10 years in Brazil and the United States. The total return of these assets in Brazil is by definition bigger than the one in the United States. You know what is this? It's the negation, the negative of the affirmation of the Munden-Fleming model that postulates that a similar title has the same interest rate around the world. This is very important. By definition, I have to prove it to you. That is by definition. My definition, of course. And why is this? You can split this expression in three different expressions. One that concerns interest rate, the other, the stream of quasi-rents, the stream of returns, and the other one is the guide. It is there in case, the A. I will explain to you what is this. So let's split the expression inequality and try to explain to you what is this. The first thing here is the interest rate. How we conclude that the interest rates in Brazil, for example, in a peripheral country is greater than one, bigger than one, greater than one in the dollar. We have to depart here from the liquidity preference. how we define liquidity preference or liquidity or premium liquidity premium. When Keynes was dealing with liquidity, he said, oh, liquidity premium is associated to the function of of currencies. If you have a currency that fulfills all the functions of money, it's a good unit account, a good means of payment, and a good store of value. It has the highest liquidity premiums. Okay? This is the idea. But let's take, this is not an operational concept. That's another way to do it. To have an operational concept, you have to put the concept. What does it signify to have a lower or higher liquidity premium, sorry. It signifies that you charge less or more to get rid of liquidity. If you have higher liquidity premium signifies lower interest rate. We are dealing with the term premium curve only. This is what we say. If you think that you have a stable, a good currency, the premium you charge in terms of interest to get rid of liquidity is lower. So this is the first thing. The second one, you have to prove that this price, and this liquidity premium in another currency is different. Then comes the Conti and say, oh, let's think that this is not more US, this is Brazil. Let's take Brazil. It's the market, What's this currency? Is his liquidity premium higher or lower than the dollar? Does this money, this currency, fulfills the conditions of currency in the international environment? This is the question. Or you have to pay, or this liquidity premium is lower because it doesn't fulfill all the requirements. And as a consequence, the interest rates is higher. This is the question, and this is by definition. Of course, you can say that liquidity cycles and everything can change, narrow the gap, okay. But by definition is this. You cannot remove this because this is associated to the role of the currency in the international level. So then you have, in my terms, this first part of the inequality. The second one is that the stream of returns is higher in a peripheral currency than in the dollar. Why that? When I think in what Keynes said, he's dealing. Maybe some people take this as a return, it's interest rate. I prefer to call it a return on asset. Because here, I think there are two different parts of it. One, credit risk. You are remunerated, the owner of the asset, related to credit risk, but market risk as well. Why I say that in the US, the same title, let's think in the same title, Brazil Treasury. What I'm saying here that Brazilian Treasury in the United States pay less return than in Brazil. Why? Credit risk is the same, but market risk is not. This market in the United States is more resilient, deeper than in Brazil. So there is this difference. The returns in Brazil are bigger, greater than in the US. For the same time, Kregel market, for example. The third one is the A. Keynes used this when he was talking about marginal efficiency of capital. And he said, oh, we should consider here the A, because I'm working with a stable monetary system without inflation, but you can have movement of relative price. And then you think, oh, okay, it's very good, let's put this in our financial system. What could be relative price here? Any suggestion? What's the definition of exchange rate? The relative prices if you are working on an international system. The one in the United States, the change from dollar to the other currencies is low. They are not relevant in this. And so they are lower than the possibility of change of exchange rates in currency like a peripheral one, Brazilian. So the third term here, the A, is bigger than the United States. Coming back to the first movement, to the first expression, I think I try to prove that you have, by definition, a bigger return in the peripheral countries of the assets, same assets, than in the United States. This is a kind of definition of international system that make it not flat. It's like this. This is a kind of hierarchy in the system. Okay? I don't think if I convinced you, but let's discuss after the last, almost the last, don't know how many times. It's the idea of the own rate of return. It's a Keynesian one. Then uncovered interest parity. I think it's a Keynes idea as well. First time I came across this was in the tract of monetary reform. Very initial work by Keynes. So he was discussing exactly this kind of relations between exchange rate and interest rate. And this is what the uncovered interest parity said. What new information this expression gives to us? I think this is less complex than this is the uncovered interest parity. It's the main idea, the main expression that is used by the people of impossible trinity, of the people from the trilemma. The reason like this. I pass is quite similar what I was saying relate to the interest rate, returns, and exchange rate. Because it's saying that in equilibrium, you can believe or not this, the domestic interest rate is the international one, if you consider including not only the American one, but the country risk, and the expectation of exchange rate variation. Look, this is a very interesting. I use a kind of chunk here to stress this idea of Mundell Fleming. that are. What does Mundell-Fleming say? Took the differential between, by definition, it's important, the differential between domestic interest rate and international interest rate is exactly equal to exchange rate expectations, variation. Exchange rate variation close the gap, and they are subordinated, their more movement are subordinated to the interest rate differential. If you take this point, it's very, very important. This is Mundell-Fleming. This is the flat word. What are our divergences about this kind of thing? Three of them. You have to consider here the size of the interest rate differential, narrow markets, and exchange rate overshooting. I dare to say that exchange rate FX have a proper life. They are not only price, definition of relative price. They are assets as well. This is the word is here. You can see the word. Exchange rate are assets, prices them, but they are assets. This is very important to get rid of this idea of flat word and Mundell-Fleming. How we can deal with this? Let's put this. I'm sorry because I was unable to put this in the same expression. Bigger than, lower than, or equal. This is it's not an equation, it's state identity. What are you saying here in this identity? You can have three situations. This is the idea of the trilemma. The equilibrium is the identity. You have two disequilibrium. Inequality or bigger than and lower than. And the problem here is all this adjust. What is the adjustment? This is the idea that you have autonomy in monetary policy. You adjust in the exchange rate. And the description is like this. You set your interest rate in a level that is higher than in the world, of the international interest rate. What would happen? What can happen? You receive capital, you evaluate, you have a valuation and in your exchange rate, and then it stops. It's a premium for the differential. The contrary is the same. It's how the system works. What are our problems? We have been discussing this a lot. This is not happen like this. Because if you don't have a fixed exchange rate system, and if your exchange rate move, it became a target. It becomes a target, the exchange rate. And you have movements. Because of this that you have an overshoot, it's not difficult to move and very quickly and in a very intense way. Why? Because because the markets are narrow, actually. So when you put your interest rate above or below the international movement, you have to deal with very hard movements in interest rate. We have seen this in Brazil a lot of time. What kind of dilemma you have here? You don't have a fixed exchange rate. You have here kind of dilemma that's dirty flow. You have to deal with the excessive movement of the exchange rate and restriction that would come or can come from the fact that you have to stabilize this impact, of monetary impact of this kind of measure. But you have the problem. You cannot leave your exchange rate to free float because the exchange rate have a role very peculiar in this kind of economy. What is the room to stabilize, to do not stabilize? This is another question that we don't have the answer here strictly. What I would like to stress is that you have the problem. And you have one more problem to finish, because that is in the why this exchange rate is very important. Because it is subject to very big movement of speculation. It's the last part here. You have an operation that's short term. It's very typical in the international environment because it is the carry trade. What is the carry trade? The carry trade is operation where you use interest rate differential to put your money in an asset, in a trade account. You have the funding, the asset, and the currencies, the differential of interest rate. The question here is, in general, it's very frequent that the asset is the exchange rate. When you are dealing with what they call the canonical, you have a foreign exchange flow. Because you are taking a loan, you are converting, but you have a flow. You have even the integration, spot markets, and all this kind of thing. When you are dealing with the second operation, that is a kind of replication of this first one, in derivatives, you don't know foreign exchange flows. All this operation that is a kind of mirror are made in reais. What is this? It amplifies the movement of speculation. So, is that this does not happen in the world that have convertible currencies, because exchange rate is not an asset in this sense, speculative asset. This is the idea. So you have to be careful. The last question here, sorry about this, I talk a lot, is if you have distinctions in the hierarchy. Of course you have. First of all, key currency, convertible currency. The idea from key currency to convertible currency, my idea, to simplify, we can discuss this, is that convertible currency operates more or less in the same way described by the model of the guys. No, the other one. The macroeconomists, the orthodox one. Mundenflein. It's a good proxy from the work of the system on the exchange rate around the world in the convertible side of it. But it is not peripheral currencies. And the question here is if there are what is the difference from convertible to inconvertible? You have the breaks. The break, I try to describe it here from one to another. I think the most important and the main difference is money versus asset. In this expression, I think there are a lot of things that we discussed here. But there is another thing. That's the grade. If you have difference among that inconvertible currency, yes, there are a lot of difference. First of all, formal one, sovereignty. You can give up your sovereignty. You can have a currency board. You can have a pegged exchange rate. You have a monetary union. You have different form of get rid of your sovereignty. But you have more. You have indicators that allow you to operate in the system. Markets. But the most important one, I'll finish with this. I think it's the public debt. Why public debt is important? All the operations that you conduct in the side of monetary operation and exchange rate operation, the final destination is fiscal in this sense. And think why Argentina cannot do anything about their economy. It's because there is no confidence. So what's the problem with Argentina? The problem with Argentina is that they don't have a public debt. In domestic currency, this is the question that's very important. So they don't have how to back the currency inside the country. Every monetary operation in Argentina, if you finance that, if you finance spending, part of it is converted in dollars. So this is a system without mediation. So this indication, size, format, type of public debt, size of market, exchange rate, foreign exchange market, size of your short-term instruments, all these kind of things are indicators that gives you some grade of freedom in dealing with what is. But remember, there is a break here. You have convertible and inconvertible currencies.
Thank you very much, Ricardo, for the very interesting and dense presentation. So let's have some questions. We have some 10 to 15 minutes left. So please. Oh, sorry, I cannot see everyone. All right. So we can start here and then.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much for your presentation. I'm thinking about what you said, that the returns in Brazil are bigger or the same title, for example, than US. So I wonder, how do you see the movement that we had in pandemics? At the beginning with low interest rates and the real devaluation, but in 2021, it started to rise, the interest rates to contain this devaluation. But how do you see this movement? Can you see a trying to use like our country as well as a way out to continue the capitalist accumulation and the continuity of the whole system through this mechanism, because we were in a crisis of production in the pandemic. So do you see this rising in interest rates in Brazil as a way of continuing the accumulation for the whole system as they like from the US and other countries to use this to continue, and also inside Brazil up to try to continue in this the way of working of the whole system.
It's a good question. I would say to you, very difficult to say this kind of thing, that you are thinking in Brazilian case. So it's different from Argentina. We have a little bit more room to deal with this kind of thing. When you are dealing with monetary policy, you have two different constraints. They are not the same. And this could give you space to operate your monetary policy. The first one is inflation. You have a target inflation. See, here. So you have to try to deal with your interest rate, focusing in this kind of thing. But you have another one, that is this liquidity cycle, cycle one. In general, what happened? The limit, the constraint, the external constraint in Brazil is lower than the first one. If you are asking of the measure to increase the interest rate, I think they did this, targeting the inflation. But they had the second objective, that is to try to defend the country of the movement, a stronger movement that is happening of flight to quality. Okay, it was direct, a movement to keep the exchange rate. It was a kind of prevention related to this. The first movement is what the inflation rate. All the problem here for the monetary policy is when you have contradictory objectives. Let's suppose that you have a retrenchment in the liquidity cycle, and then you have to stimulate the economy. What would you choose? This is the you have the same, more or less the same movement. And this is the kind of the movement of assets and the movement of price of commodities and services. How to deal with this? More or less the same problem that you have in developed countries. Despite the fact that here the main asset is exchange rate. No.
Yes.
So our friend from Argentina. There. Yes.
Okay. Hello. Yeah, I am from Argentina, so
Oh,
really interested
hermano está aquí.
on this subject. The thing, or I don't know if the problem, but the thing that I have with this theory about the hierarchy, I think that when we are making the distinction between the K currency and the peripheral currencies, I think that the distinctions are really clear. I agree. We use in some moments a concept like the power, the answer. I mean, I think that is strong, and I agree with the theory. My problem is when we are trying like to differentiate between the peripheral currencies. There, I look sometimes like to the explanations. And I didn't find something like clear. For example, it's the current account balance or the productive structure, or for example, you speak about the size of the public debt in domestic currency, but I don't know if that is a cause or a consequence of how the Argentinian peso is working. So my question, or I would like to know if you agree that it's like less developed, that part of the theory about the difference between peripheral currencies, and how to improve that. For example, for me, it's like the notion of power that is more used in the difference between central and peripheral countries. Are not used. I don't know exactly how is or what are the solution, but or if you know like people working in that, like to go deep in the difference between the hierarchies. It's like for me it's really important because
I know, I understand your. It's difficult to we try here put the frame to understand this difference because the debate was dominated, even in the paradox side, right? This idea of trilemma, of impossible trinity. And it was a big effort. And then we differentiate less the peripheral than convex currency. This is true. But there are some clues to deal with the problem. Look, the question of what I said, size, markets, debt, size of the country, structure, short-term, long-term, all these things are important because they have a kind of return on the policy that you are trying to do. Let's take the case for Argentina and to stress the question that I was trying to say that the public debt is very important. Argentina, as far as I know that Argentina do not have a public debt. It has a public debt, but very short. Very similar to the central bank intervention. Yeah. Let's suppose that I try, as you have been doing, to finance the debt through mission, financial money issue. What would happen? Let's compare what would happen in Brazil and what would happen in Argentina. In Argentina, you don't have mediation. You have to sterilize this kind of thing with central bank titles. And this will stay like this, and then you have a permanent arbitrage between this and the interest rate, and even part of this emission goes to the exchange rate market, not the official, the blue, everything, okay? And as it is a continuous flow, it pressures the exchange rate. You have a different kind of impact in this. You can have this, some kind of pressure, but it's easier in Brazil to capture this kind of through short-term operation, even with the bulk debt, the long one. You can change positions. So you have more room in Brazil than it's because of that you have kind of stability that's bigger here than in Argentina. I'm using one aspect of this. That is public debt. You have some handicaps in Brazil, derivative markets in Brazil standard for the operation of the system. So what I'm trying to say is, I don't know if you can set a theory or a more abstract. Maybe we should try. Principle of how is the differentiation among peripheral currencies. But it's not defined, I agree with you. Maybe we should try.
okay. Thank you.
Gary, please.
Oh,
Thank you for a marvelous lecture. And there's a word in Portuguese that we don't have in English, aprofundar, to make something more profound. And I appreciate the way that you've taken your subject and just drenched it in Keynes and in deeper insights about the workings of the system. I want to relate 2 points to things I was talking about yesterday and then come to a question. yesterday I warned the students about the new literature on safe assets, the shortage of safe assets in the global economy, which has been used to actually explain why that we see some of the global imbalances. And this is something that is led by a team of economists at MIT and Harvard, which include, yesterday we mentioned Ricardo Carneiro, but another member of that group is Emmanuel Farhi. And we also yesterday mentioned, I'm going to come back to Farhi in a minute. We also mentioned Helene Ray and the change from the trilemma to the dilemma. And the fact that I pointed out to the students that they should read her very carefully, because while Borio is kind of a Keynesian, Helene Ray is an efficient markets person. She doesn't have a problem with this. Now, let me just say that while you were talking, I just did a little looking in the recent literature. Turns out that Emmanuel Farhi, has a 2016 paper called Rare Disasters and Exchange Rates, published in the QJE, which, is kind of a house organ for MIT and Harvard economists. And he takes the example of, he says, well, we have considered two countries, Switzerland and Brazil. And basically he says, investors are willing to lend to Switzerland at low interest rates because the Swiss exchange rate will appreciate relative to Brazil's in a disaster. Okay, so basically he explains, for example, carry trade as we can expect a disaster. But of course, your analysis shows that the carry trade is taking advantage of this expected depreciation, which we know is not going to happen. It's basically a structural lock-in that permits this extraction of wealth from Brazil. And so, it's just evil the way that I see the safe assets in this reinterpretation as a very twisted defense of an indefensible system by economists in the global north who are playing their own game. I would just point out to the students, this is very serious. We have to, and I had urged them yesterday, to be sure to take on these mainstream arguments as you do your research. We have to make our ideas better, as you pointed out, our heterodox ideas, but we also have to contend with those. So I had two questions. So thank you for a wonderful lecture. One is, do you think that would a Helene Ray and that group, would they be in favor of capital controls, actually? Do they really care? And then secondly, with the carry trade, are we seeing Brazilian nationals participating in that as well as foreign nationals? Is this like a double movement across borders, as we're seeing newspapers now talk about the revitalization of Brazilian carry trade in the 2022?
Beginning with the last one, I don't think that the Brazil, because the interest rate differential is very big. You have, when you look at the movement of investment from the Brazilian residents abroad, they are many, what I would say, portfolio. They are more long-run assets. Carry trades are very short-term operation. And the interest rate differential, if you keep aside the exchange rate in Brazil, is almost 12 percentage points. That is very interesting, because this is on a comment. I was to say this. We will have here, in this year in Brazil, only relate to the carry cost of reserves, around 2.4% of GDP of interest rate. Only relate to the carry of reserves. these days. But I don't think that there is interest from the corporation, banks to make the risk carry trade. It's very, maybe in a stress time. The point related to Ellen Ray, his paper is her contribution is a little bit controversial because I think she defends capital control in the paper. The problem with Ellen Ray is that this idea of safe assets. That, you keep talking about the U.S. saying that the U.S. has a sovereign privilege, but they have the dirty. They have the safe. They have to issue the safe assets of the system. And when the system come back in the cycle, they pay a price. Well, when they see go on, they get profit. So what is the question here? This is not the privilege. I don't think this is a bad part of their job. It's not only Greensians and other one.
Yeah.
I don't like this because I don't think this is a more ideological argument than that. But I think that the paper, as far as I remember, she defends capital control.
Thanks for your Professor. Well, I have two questions. The first, I want to hear your ideas about the creation of monetary union. So maybe we can't expect by reality, because everything that we're talking here is like the dollars system, then the euro. And I'd like to know if it's not the right time, maybe to start this discussion of creating monetary union. And the second one is about the role of the central bank in Brazil, because we have the Professor one called the exchange rates. Meaning somehow the central bank helps you to trade the market, and sometimes it's called swaps. They somehow can interfere in the market where foreign investment is very high, and maybe they can pressure exchange rates. So I'd like to maybe it's not the right time also to start this kind of exchange rate regime in Brazil.
Professor, my question is about Mercosur too, so can I make it because it's related. One of my biggest questions always was how to analyze what I consider the periphery in the periphery. That is the study of Paraguay and Uruguay in the Mercosur. You have two countries that together have 7 million people. That is the size of a Brazilian city. And you have the case of Paraguay, where the GDP is the half of some Brazilian states as Santa Catarina. So how in the theoretical framework we can analyze those specific cases? As we talked with Eduardo, in Africa, there's so many examples as this, where you have a periphery inside of the periphery, and how actually we can think about the Mercosur future when actually in those last 30 years we don't even implement a common rule for our commerce.
The first thing is the Brazilian exchange rate regime. I think we have a very sophisticated market and exchange rate policy in Brazil. Besides, of course, the central bank said, no, we don't intervene. This is a free float. It's not a free float. They intervene a lot. And not necessarily. This year they sold reserves. But they used to intervene through derivative markets. Swaps. Selling swaps or reverse swaps, depending on the movement. But this is not very, this have a cost as well. It's not solve the problem. In the sense, in 2015, 2016, when the exchange rate exploded, the first year, 2016, it cost around, we paid a interest rate charge of 10% of GDP, and part related to the behavior of swaps. So it's a constraint. You were able to deal with this kind of thing, but it is a constraint. This is my point. So we have more instruments. You cannot think in this kind of derivative market. Paraguay, even Uruguay, Chile, yes. So there are very big differences. And what is the problem with central bank? The problem with central bank managed interest rate, but he managed exchange rate as well. But for this, independent central banks in the States, in the EU, this is not a relevant problem. The exchange rates, this is not a problem. Because they say the price, all the things that we said here. But now, here in Brazil, it's very relevant. And he keeps moving his policy and said, no, this is not a problem. Of course it is. Look at the intervention of central bank. They are very huge. So this is a problem that we should clarify. Maybe we have a kind of committee organized to decide, independent from the who decide about interest rate, who decide about exchange rate. It's not transparent because they act very frequently, but they said they don't. No, it's not important. Even the exchange rate fluctuation in the model of central bank that they use to decide about interest rate policy is considered to have the movement of exchange rate is considered to have a randomic behavior. Is that? But this is a lie. The second question is the monetary union in Mercosur, South America. I'm against. I don't think that we have room to anchor and to create. Look at the China case. China is the second, maybe, for some criteria, the first economy in the world. The bigger trader, FDI as well. And he has a very limited currency in the beach. China is trying, maybe he succeed in this kind of thing, but it's very, and we are dealing with a very big, the second economy in the world. How you anchor your new, it's the thing, you have a backup currency in peripheral economy. But suppose that you join 5 or 6 countries and 5 or 6 currencies. What's the change in this kind of? You hear you say, if you sum a lot of bad things, you don't get one good thing. So, I'm including Brazil as well in this case. I think you have a lot of things to do related to regional integration in the monetary field. For example, trade. You can create clearing house to have a most dynamic system of trade in the all currency with a clearing house. Developing banks, you can improve a lot the development. You have a lot of things. And treat the integration, monetary integration, as a kind of monetary utopia. Of course, you can put this as a long-run objective, but it won't work here. It's very difficult. maybe to step by step,
Small steps.
Brad.
Small steps.
Small steps. This is the small steps.
Okay, so unfortunately we're running out of time, so let's go for a break and then we come back with Andrea with the same topic, but another point of view.
Not another vision.